Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's the return of the movie!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the return of the movie. I'm Ben.
I'm Alex.
I'm Matt.
Oh.
All right, everybody, welcome to the podcast where we talk about sequels, reboots, and franchises. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us out. And if you're listening on audio, which hopefully you are, because audio comes first, as many of our good people know at this point, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcast. I still can't say Apple Podcast quick enough. And
The website formerly known as iTunes.
yes, that one. And of course, if you're on the YouTube side of things, you know what to do. Come check out all of our shows at youtube.com/Scope Productions. I didn't dab for you guys there. I've been getting a lot of complaints about the dabbing. But that is neither here nor there. What is here and there, and in the past, and now, Alex, what movie are we talking about today?
Oh, we are traveling back in time to 1982 for Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Now, the 80s were a time when children started to be thought of as real people. Not by their parents, of course, but by corporations after that sweet, sweet allowance money. And the thought that you can make up for almost any amount of neglect with stuff. We begin our story at a hospital with no HR department. Our protagonist, who's supposed to be an absolute ladies' man, even though he ruined his marriage by being an alcoholic, barely cares about his kids, and can't communicate with anyone around him, especially his nagging wife. After a mysterious murder-suicide, Dr. Chalice uncovers a plot that involves an old witch who's still pretty upset about that whole Irish need not apply thing. And to make matters worse, he's like really into astrology. The only Halloween movie to not include Michael Myers, this movie failed almost as hard as New Coke, both of which could have probably benefited from a little bit of the white stuff and just literally any thought.
Oh, God. Okay. Yeah, needless to say, this movie's a little bit of a doozy. Matt, could you walk us through who is responsible for this mess?
Before I do that, I want to quote a review.
You want to... Oh, we're starting out with review quotes, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be a good one.
My phone is frozen for the moment. Give me a second.
So unprofessional.
Okay, so the New York Times review, courtesy of Vincent Canby, says, Halloween 3 manages the not easy feat of being anti-children, anti-capitalism, anti-television, and anti-Irish all at the same time.
Oh!
Oh, man.
I love it when movie reviewers get sassy. It's so funny. So the people responsible for this are actually kind of in the same family as the folks who made Halloween's 1 and 2. So it's a John Carpenter, Deborah Hill production. They didn't direct, they didn't write, but they wanted it to be in the family. So Dean Cundy, who was the DP for the first 2 Halloween movies, he returns here. John Carpenter does the soundtrack. Tommy Lee Wallace, who was involved with the first 2 Halloween movies, directed this one and wrote it. And then it stars Tom Atkins, Stacey Nelkin, Dan O'Harely, Michael Curry, Al Berry, and Dick Warlock, who also played Michael Myers in Halloween 2. So a lot of familiar faces. Dick Warlock played a lot of the androids.
You can't say Dick Warlock and expect me not to laugh.
That is a great name.
How did that man survive middle school?
By being a big guy.
Okay,
Like he's a big. I mean, he played Michael when they turned him into like a linebacker, basically.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
he was Halloween 2 Michael, not like the short, kind of like skinny Michael from Halloween 1. So 2 fun facts. Well, 3. Alex has 1. So the first fun fact is the operator who answers the phone when Tom Atkins is dialing from the hotel like a fucking moron is Jamie Lee Curtis.
Oh.
So she cameoed in this.
That's nice.
The name of the town is a reference to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 1956 version, because it's the same town name as from that movie.
I feel like they were better off just not drawing any attention to Invasion of the Body Snatchers on this one, but
Well, it's John Carpenter. He's always immersed in horror and the history of horror. So, like, even in Halloween 1, you had The Thing from Another World. You had just kind of like the spirit of other horror movies. His
Yeah.
other big hit was a remake
that's
of The
fair.
Thing. So,
That,
it's like he's somebody who can't help himself with the references.
Is it an homage or is it a ripoff? What a constant question. My fun fact is that Halloween, actually, the first one, premiered on NBC at 9 p.m. October 31st, 1982. So this movie almost has
Oh.
an ad in it to go watch the original
Really?
Halloween at 9 p.m.
That's so honestly. So here's the thing: we're about to fucking tear. I want to make it very clear to the audience: we're gonna tear into this thing because, but there's a lot of things in this that I'm just like, that's cool. I like that. Oh, that was such a neat idea.
Yeah. I mean,
Execution's
I feel like,
a different story, and
yeah, John Carpenter
Fortunately,
really
John
keeps it in the
Carpenter did not
family.
recognize-
He's always reusing the same actors, reusing the same like crew and things like that. Just a lot of the same people. But then a lot of self-promotion, which I think is great. Do it if you can.
Well, it's just you see Halloween on the TVs in this movie.
yeah.
Including like, and they sneak in the original score of the first one in a couple of like creepy moments in this one too, using that, and so I thought that was clever.
No, I think there's a lot of good pieces here. I think it's very good. It's very obvious in hindsight that John Carpenter did not direct this. We're going to talk about the movie in a little bit.
Yeah, he was
but-
off doing the thing while this was happening.
Perfect. That's the best excuse he has.
Yeah.
Because The Thing is one of my favorite horror movies. So, well, I'm very happy with that. But let's talk about one of the most fascinating things about this film is the intention behind its creation. So, contrary to what anyone would believe, but if you were to say that Halloween was originally supposed to be an anthology series, you would be correct.
Yeah, so Carpenter, after Halloween 2, he was kind of dragged back kicking and screaming for doing it. So he didn't direct the second one, but he wrote it and had a pretty big hand in producing it. And so he created it in such a way that it would definitively close the door on the Michael Myers story. He wanted to make sure that shit was done. He got blown up, Loomis gets killed, Jamie Lee Curtis rides off into the sunset with a guy that didn't die. So
That's just the baseline. A guy that didn't die.
I mean, but the point is that the story is over.
Yeah.
And here he wanted to turn it into like almost a Twilight Zone in film. He wanted each Halloween installment to be a different story that was centered around the holiday. And so this was the first attempt at that, and as it turns out, the only attempt. But according to him and Tommy Lee Wallace, they had dozens of ideas ready to go and potential sequel ideas for some of these other ideas. Now, as you know, like if you've just ever listened to like Guillermo del Toro talk, the guy has 40 bajillion ideas that never got used. Like the guy had a sequel to Pan's Labyrinth at one point that
Oh my gosh.
it's in my Full Stop review that you apparently didn't watch.
I've been really busy these last 2 weeks. I'm sorry.
Long story short, he dropped it in favor of doing Hellboy 2.
What?
He chose poorly.
That sucks.
But
Oh,
anyways,
that's a bummer.
getting back to the topic at hand. So it's like filmmakers are always talking about ideas that are never going to materialize. So just a lot of this stuff has to be taken with a grain of salt. But it was such a unique idea at the time because there's always been anthology horror films like the film Black Sabbath, which was a series of I think 3 or 4 like shorter films put together, which is where the band got their name. The band Black Sabbath got their name. You have the Twilight Zone movie, which happened right around the same time, I think, shortly after this. Just the Twilight Zone in general.
Yeah.
You know, and like I think other TV shows like Tales from the Crypt and Night Gallery and stuff like Alfred Hitchcock's Hour and stuff like that.
I mean, horror anthology, again, is absolutely nothing new. I mean, there's plenty of modern examples of this as well. Like, oh my god,
American Horror Story.
American Horror Story, another good film set that I instantly comes to mind for me because Netflix was, especially in the early days of Netflix, was VHS, which
Well, Creepshow came out the same year.
Yeah, there's so many. It's just a really common thing, but I think the reason why no one's like complaining about like, oh, there's too many horror anthologies is because it's probably the best genre to do anthologies for.
Yeah.
And one of the nice things about it is that, especially what becomes a problem for this franchise later on, power creep, when you're doing anthologies, that's how you get around it. You can still sort of keep a lot of the same ideas, or hell, even the same world if you want to, but be able to introduce something more terrifying every time.
Well, the fun thing with some of these early Halloween movies, like up to and including 3, is that they're kind of a celebration of the holiday itself in a lot of ways. Like, everyone's entitled to one good scare, you know? And here you get a lecture about how the original holiday was commercialized, you know? So there's kind of like a love about the holiday and just the general season and the feeling, the environment that it evokes here that you kind of lose later on in the franchise. So that's something I've always appreciated this. But this movie bombed pretty fucking hard. It was a commercial disaster. Critics hated it. And some of it was this movie's own merits because, as we're going to get into, this movie is a lot better in execution than it is or a lot better on paper than it is in execution. But some of it was that fans were really confused when this came out.
Yeah.
Everybody saw this and was like, where the hell is Michael Myers? Because remember, Friday the 13th, a couple weeks before, like 2 months before this came out, released its 3rd installment, the one where he finally gets the hockey mask. And so you're on Friday the 13th Part 3 and a bajillion others. And Poltergeist also came out this year, if I remember correctly.
Yep. Rated PG because they didn't have really PG-13 back then.
Oh my gosh. It was... the rating system in the United States is still one of I find it to be the funniest thing, and also probably like one of the worst thing that's ever been created for so many reasons, but we're not at that point where I can really dive in on it yet. But for now, evidently sleeping with a young-looking woman is still PG, guys.
We still don't know her age.
We don't. I'm so concerned.
They go to have sex for the 3rd time, and he's like, "Oh, my lizard brain is thinking I might be in a little bit of hot water. Let me ask her age." And she's like, "I'm older than I look." And he's like, "Good enough for me." God. And then, what's his name? Chris.
She needed a new daddy right away, apparently.
Yeah, it's like, surprise, you're on To Catch a Predator.
What was the moral compassing on this film? But
I wanna talk a little bit before we really.
I know it's so difficult not to.
The last thing I'll say about like the anthology idea is that this definitively shut the door on the idea. Every film from here on out just turned into the Michael Myers power creep show. And like Jamie Lee Curtis was done with the franchise after this. John Carpenter, Deborah Hill, Dean Cundy, they were all done with it. And so really the only returning cast member or crew member for a long time was just Donald Pleasance until he died in 1995. So Halloween 6 was the last one he did.
Interesting.
Jamie Lee Curtis came back for 7 and 8, and then it just like the whole thing just spanned, but like they just took the Michael Myers story and then it just spun completely out of control after that.
So when we were originally talking about doing this, because I'm very new to the franchise, ladies and gentlemen, I thought that the issue here was going to be that the 3rd movie would have opened up some really good doors if it weren't for the fact that fans rejected it for not having Michael Myers. I legitimately thought that the only problem with this film was going to be Michael Myers and the lack of him thereafter.
No.
It was a problem. It was not the problem.
I feel like, and I guess we're about to get into it, but this film could have been so much better.
There
And
are
I feel
some
like had it
incredibly
been
interesting
better-
topics in the movie.
Yeah. The I one of my favorite things with this film is like there's so many moments where I'm like thinking to myself like that must have been terrifying in the screenplay. Like there were some things that I was thinking about like okay, how this was written is just there's this one lone still-faced looking man in a hospital just walking through and goes and suffocates and tears parts of this dude's face off, and it's all eerily quiet, and it's just supposed to be this sort of like visual, like you could tell that if it were on the page your mind would be filling in all these horrific details because it was bland.
Yeah, you're
But
talking
then the
about
issue was that when it got
Halloween 3 or
translated to
Halloween
screen
2?
it sounds like I'm talking about Halloween 2. I'm talking about Halloween 3.
Yeah.
That is the, like, when you think about what it looks like on paper, that's what it was supposed to feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got, I think the first moment that I knew that this movie was going to be bad was when the dude got squished by a car and he just went
in slow motion. It was slow motion, too.
It was so, but it didn't seem like slow motion. It just seemed like the car was moving slowly.
Yep.
That was the problem with it. Like, to me, like, one of the big issues with this, not even getting into the acting and the writing, was just the cinematography. Because I don't think the cinematography at all assisted what the script was trying to do. And that could also be that could also be credited to the director for those bad choices as well. But it really was both people dropped the ball on that. Because no one was really trying to assist what the script was doing.
I didn't hate the cinematography. I just hated most aspects of the script.
Well, the technical thing I had the biggest problem with was actually the dialogue was mixed really, really
Oh my
low.
god.
And so, like, it was hard to hear what the characters were saying, and it's like, I thought my TV was having a problem, but then the soundtrack kicks in, and it's fine, and I'm like, oh, wait, no, it's
just done poorly.
Something's wrong with the mix.
The soundtrack is grating and it's very subpar, obviously, to Halloween, and that very famous soundtrack. It's just like, oh, here's a bad guy. I know because you just blasted me in the ears.
Well, the funny thing is that it includes stingers in the soundtrack in moments where it's not even necessary.
Yeah.
Like, there's a shot of them driving, and there's just a stinger, and there's like,
Nothing's
what is
happening.
that? Like, nothing's happening.
Looking
why is
over
that
my
there?
shoulder.
Like, the whole point of a stinger is that it is accompanied by something.
Yeah.
Yeah, the funny thing is that, like, I didn't hate the soundtrack. I just thought it was, like, weirdly placed at points, because, like, I kind of liked what Carpenter was trying to do with it, where it was, like, evocative of the original score. It was in the same key. Sometimes it was in the same time signature. Sometimes it was using the same intervals. And so it's still trying to keep it related to the original one while trying to have its own identity. So from that standpoint, I appreciated it. But there's one scene right as the villain's going on his evil monologue, which is one of my favorite scenes in the film, other than the scene of the pumpkin head kid,
that
like,
was one of
getting
the
his face
legitimately terrifying moments.
Well, I knew it was coming with that one because, you know, I've seen this before, but it's there's a scene where the evil villain is monologuing to the main character, which is just begging the question, why hasn't he just shot the guy? This is a total nobody coming in. It's like there's no point to keep this guy alive. Nobody's looking for this guy. He's not important enough to like lecture at, but, you know, main character powers, I suppose. And the soundtrack from the original Halloween is playing because it's playing on the TV. And so it gives you a chance to use some diegetic sound. And I thought that the placement of that score was really well done.
There's so many fucking problems with this, though. Like, for every single cool moment that I went, oh, that's going to be interesting. Oh, wait, that's actually really cool world building.
Yeah.
Oh, there were, like, 10 other things that just completely robbed me of the moment. And
Yeah.
the main thing for me, honestly, just with the writing, so I do need to clarify something, Alex, because I want to make sure that you know what I meant. When I said the script had really scary moments in it, I was mostly talking about the action, because the dialogue and character writing are atrocious.
Oh, obviously. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but nothing gets me hot and heavy like the idea of my dad having just been murdered. And I'm doing detective work, and I'm gonna fuck a stranger now. And the worst part is it adds literally nothing. If they had taken out that whole part or parts,
Yep.
would literally change nothing. The only interesting thing about them having sex is that the lady in the hotel room next to them has a misfire and blows her mouth off. And then a hornet crawls out. That's the only, like, the most weird, boring sex. Also, they already make a joke about how they packed light, but somehow this chick has, like, a sexy, like, satin lace lingerie romper. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, her dad was just murdered. She wasn't expecting to travel very far. She was just coming up to identify his body and then leave. But she was like, oh, what if I want to fuck? Like, gotta make sure.
Well,
this is
hold
in
up,
there.
hold up. Headcanon, guys, headcanon. Did they ever tell us what her profession was?
She's from LA, so I'm gonna assume actress. So maybe it does check out.
I was gonna say stripper, because I think if she's a stripper, it all makes sense, right? Like that was just her day clothes. That was her uniform in there.
Strippers do not wear that either, especially in the 80s. So
I have
no.
never been to a strip club, so okay. Well, never mind. Strippers don't wear lace pants. Oh,
It's
okay.
just like a
Well-
like a romp. Like what? It doesn't make any sense. And
Hooker?
they also, I don't know. The script sucks. I mean, what else? There's really not too much more to go on, and it's sad because I think
The
the
characters are
idea
just-
of witchcraft in the modern digital age, like, cool concept that you can do so many things
Yeah.
with that, and they ruin it.
We spent our time on horny doctor instead, and
Yeah. We're killing off all
Daisy
these
Milk.
kids, and we don't even build a relationship with a single fucking
No.
child.
I feel
There's
like
so
at the
many
very
other
least we
things that
should have
could have
seen
taken
his
place.
kids more.
Oh, he doesn't give a shit
Because
about his
like
kids.
the whole point is that he's a terrible family man, and he's a terrible father, and he's a terrible husband or ex-husband or whatever. But I like there's a scene later on in the film where he calls from the phone in their warehouse like a fucking idiot, and is like begging his wife to have them take the masks off, but he is so estranged from them at that point that she's not going to listen to anything he's going to say because he's alcoholic and just neglectful. So I think that's a cool twist of his own past mistakes coming back to haunt him. But the point is you
don't
didn't
build
see it
those
before, yeah, but you
characters.
don't know the characters, so it's like it robs the moment of the impact it should have had.
Also, it feels like it makes zero sense for him to, because he's doing all this detective work, right? Like even before this girl gets here, and like he's a fucking doctor. Why? Like this movie would have worked 10 times better if he was just a detective. He still could have been a horny detective. At least it would have had like a noir vibe to it. But instead, he's just a horny doctor.
Yeah, the whole franchise fails from thinking that doctors can also be detectives, because that fucking happened in Halloween 1 and 2. Like, the, like, fucking sheriff's office
Well, that
is
detective,
taking...
the doctor goes to
orders
the
from him.
sheriff's office at least.
Yeah,
This franchise, yes, it makes the same mistake in the second one, but like it shouldn't be at the point where like I'm taken out of the movie in the first act. Also, I timed it. We meet our main character 9 minutes into the film.
9 minutes?
9 minutes and 33 seconds is when he is first on screen.
Jesus, that first scene goes on for almost...
Yes.
That's the other thing I think is really bad about this movie is just the pacing. There's so many just long slogs of it. Like, you could have had that guy just getting murdered in the first 5 minutes in a lot more concisely than it was done. And it's just, when this film drags, it just fucking drags.
It could have been
Yeah.
a short film, is what
and-
it feels like.
No. It's somehow an hour and a half and 3 hours at the same time.
But I'm saying, like, I feel like it could have been executed better. Like, it may have been, I mean, not that short films were huge back then, but that's just, like, the feel of it. Is like, oh, this could have maybe been 20, 30 minutes.
I don't know.
It's just like
Yeah,
an essay
or-
where you need to up the word count. Like the part where, oh my god, the robot Ellie is coming at him over and over again.
The body
It's
snatchers
so
moment.
bad.
Well, it just like keeps happening. He's walking away, and then it's like the hand, and then
then
he
they're
walks
like,
away
zoop,
again, and it's like the
zap.
headless body.
But it's bad. The only thing I
It-
really liked about this
it
movie
should-
was
funny.
the ending. I love a nihilistic, like bleak ending, and it was good. But why did I have to watch this whole movie to get to it?
Why did we have
Fun
to
fact
listen?
about the ending is that there were multiple endings shot, so only a handful of people knew how the movie was going to end, and the cast was kind of surprised by which ending they actually went with.
Really?
Yeah, Tommy
What,
Lee
were
Wallace
there other
said
like
that.
spicier takes?
Tommy Lee Wallace said that he thinks part of the reason the movie bombed was because he stuck to his guns about this ending and the studio didn't like it, so they didn't market the movie as much. Which, that's not the
I
only
don't
reason that
think-
it bombed, but
Nope. I was about to say this was not a marketing error. If it would have been worse if this thing was marketed heavily, in all honesty. This would have if it was marketed heavily, I would be willing to say that there was a chance that the franchise would have never come back.
I mean, it very almost didn't. I mean, it was like 6 or 7 years before the next one got made.
Well, damn.
Which, you know, in 80s horror franchises is an eternity, because, like, how many Friday the 13th were they up to by the time Halloween 4 came around, right? But
Was it just like a Call of Duty one a year type situation?
kinda.
Oh gosh.
And
Oh.
I think Nightmare on Elm Street was up to 3 by that point. 2 or 3. And
Matt,
then Texas Chainsaw was up to just gonna move this. Texas Chainsaw was up to about 4 or 5 by that point.
Yeah.
But this movie has some interesting ideas. It's really weird with it. Like, it feels, it's not a slasher movie in any sense of the word, but it's kind of shot and like framed like one.
That's my issue with it.
But it has more in common with like The Wicker Man or Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and to be fair, it directly draws that parallel with the Santa Mira town. So like Ellie being replaced by a robot is straight out of Body Snatchers.
I feel like a lot of it just. My whole thing when I was watching this was I was like, wow, if this thing was just written and directed better, which I know is saying a lot, but the ideas here were so succinct and like it's my understanding that we even go into sort of this witch territory with the original run of Halloween in the first place. Is that not correct?
Kind of. So the Samhain festival, which is kind of like where All Hallows Eve, like where the origins of the holiday comes from, is referenced in Halloween 2. And in Halloween 4, you see like this weird little tattoo on Michael's like wrist. In number 5, it's somebody breaks him out of jail. And then in number 6, it's revealed that there's a druid cult controlling him, and there needs to be a family having its entire bloodline wiped out in order to appease a certain sacrifice and within a certain amount of planetary aligned time or something like that.
Oh gosh,
It's
well,
bad.
They have the whole planets aligning thing here as well for this Halloween.
And in Hercules.
Yeah.
So yeah, they would go back to the Celtic cult thing later. And then The sixth one is the one where, depending on which cut you see, it's either about a Celtic cult or it's about a Celtic cult forcing Michael to
What?
they 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 forced Michael Myers to,
Can you say this on the internet?
yes, I can. They forced Michael Myers to impregnate his own niece
Ah.
so that he can kill her. He dies and then passes the curse on to the next member of the bloodline.
I'm sorry. I just looked up, and Alex, I know we're only getting the iPad feed from you, but your face on your laptop feed is just phenomenal.
That's the producer's cut.
Oh, that's the producer's cut where that happens?
The theatrical cut, like the director saw that and was like, the fuck? And then
So
cut
that's
that
like,
shit out.
this is Daddy's little secret. I'll keep this one. Like, multiple people were involved.
Also, Paul Rudd was in that one.
Oh wow! I'm sure he's very proud of that. Yeah,
I think he's done everything possible to dissociate himself with this franchise.
That would not. I mean, I feel like a lot of people have. There is something about 90s. Oh, excuse me. Horror franchises in general, where I feel like people just start, unless it's Scream, people just start getting the fuck out of Dodge.
Well, the funny thing is that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is kind of infamous for having actors in it whose careers took off afterwards. So, like, Dennis Hopper.
Yeah.
Part of his career renaissance was Texas Chainsaw Massacre too, and then he was in that, and then like Blue Velvet and Hoosiers came after that, and so his career like rebounded in a big way after that movie. Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey had early stints in Texas. One of the Texas Chainsaws.
yeah. The
And then
like
they've
next
done everything
generation.
possible
Yeah,
to
that
bury.
was like a huge thing for them.
Yeah. And then Jessica Alba got her start in the remake. So it's like there's kind of a long history about this sort of thing.
It's.
Not for any of these movies.
such
like
a-
pretty much bar
No.
Jamie Lee
Curtis, I guess, but yeah.
That's about it.
But
And then
Busta Rhymes.
her
You
her
get-
friend has kind of a pretty prolific horror career, but for the most part, not the same.
Yeah, it's. I just like watching this film. It's again, and we've harped on it. It just reeks of disappointment because I genuinely think that this was a great idea that they had, turning this into an anthology series, and it may have robbed it. If this had succeeded, it might have robbed us of Michael Myers as we know him now. But I still think that there would have been a chance, like, oh, we could have seen so many other cool things. And this movie had such a damn cool concept. Granted, it was pigeonholed with a terrible jingle,
Plus Stonehenge.
plus Stonehenge, right in the beginning.
When the
Like,
director was asked about how that works with Stonehenge and computers and like astrology, he was like, I don't know, it's magic, man.
Yeah. Well, even like
that's
I really like the movie poster for this. I'm pretty sure it actually got nominated or won a Saturn Award. It's a pretty great movie poster. But their tagline is "The night no one comes home." But a very vital plot point in this movie is that kids need to make sure they get home and tune into that TV at 9 p.m. So what is it? Which one is it?
That's the other thing. I thought that this movie should have had the greatest marketing strategy ever. Because could you imagine if even if this movie was bad, could you imagine if those Shamrock commercials actually aired on television?
If it were made today or in the 90s, it probably would have been.
Oh, for sure.
Man.
Especially with what Blair Witch did a decade later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would have been like golden marketing. Honestly, this thing was just made in a different decade, I think. And I still will say it needed at least a different director at the very least.
This movie has continued my hatred of advertising.
I
But I liked that it was kind of like what it was playing on the fear of like the prominence of advertising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I feel like this movie tries to get its message right so many times, but it just doesn't really stick to it. at all. And I like, even just going back to the main character, like, I can't tell if I'm supposed to like him or hate him. Like,
I like that the movie kind of has his past sins coming back to haunt him, like with that phone call with the family.
Yeah,
it just
but-
didn't go far
Yeah.
enough in that direction.
every thematic thing that they do in this movie is like pigeonholed in, while there's also like him just smacking nurses' asses and like,
yeah.
Yeah, like when you're pointing out the
And
phone
then-
call thing, it kind of makes me think of like the Twilight Zone. Feels very much like that. But when again, this probably would have made a good episode of the Twilight Zone. 30 minutes, get in, get out.
Yeah.
We don't
Oh,
have to
would've
be
been
fucking
amazing.
young grieving daughters and ignoring children.
Well, the other thing, like, the characters are just dumb in this movie. So, like,
Yes.
they go incognito. They know something's up by this point. They know people are dying. They know, like, but you see the car and then you start screaming in the middle of enemy territory and running towards it. It's like,
She's-
what the fuck did you expect was going to happen?
and then only afterwards she's like, I think we should leave. That's a bad thing.
And then they go back.
Yep.
Yes, I do want to leave as soon as I find out what happened to my dad, and then it just like crossfades to them asleep. All right.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's needless to say, this movie is it's such a fascinating piece. I really, really wish that this movie had worked out. And, like, for me, this is going to be, like, probably one of the biggest what-ifs of cinema I've ever experienced. Of if this thing had been, honestly, just mediocre, what would have happened?
Well, because, oh god, I'm gonna get hate for this, but horror fans have, like, way lower standards of what is considered good or acceptable to put out and consume.
Horror
and,
fans
like-
or horror filmmakers? Because,
Well, both, really.
Both.
but,
Okay.
Like,
Hopefully one in the
everyone
same.
jumped on that.
like the amount of movies that if they were any other genre were as bad as they are, like, wouldn't there are so many movies that are just terrible that have such big followings just because they're part of that genre or part of, like, a certain franchise. Like, this movie has kind of had a reevaluation in the last 10 to 15ish years, and this movie is starting to gain a cult following in recent years
Why?
because it's different.
But it's bad.
In the time since this movie has come out, we've had like 5 more movies in the main Michael Myers canon come out. Most of them bad. We've had a remake that was done by Rob Zombie, of all people. Opinions are mixed on that one, or both of them at least. But and then we're having another reboot that's just continuing some of the same story threads. So this was the only one that did anything different, and it does. Like, it's frustrating because it gets a lot right in concept and just kind of falls on its face.
The feeling of isolation in this movie should have been downright terrifying.
It should have been more like Wicker Man, or like Invasion of the Body Snatchers takes place in San Francisco, but there's a certain point in that movie, or the 70s movie, where it feels like they're the only people in that town.
Yeah.
And so it's like you don't even get to that town until, what, 40 minutes into the movie? 35-ish minutes. And the
Yeah, it's
first thing
almost
that
like
they do
House
when
of
they get there
Wax,
is have
kind
sex.
of.
Yeah. And they're going off about, like, oh, this place is creepy. I don't want to be here. And
That should have been like
Just-
the 15-minute midpoint,
Yeah.
was them getting to that town, and the first act should have been that woman blowing her face off.
this, again, I think Alex put it very well. Originally, I was thinking this probably could have been done in 45 minutes, but honestly, a 30-minute episode of The Twilight Zone is probably what this needed to be. Or at least just a 40-minute or like an hour-long film. It did it. I don't think we needed to go. I did not need to go through an hour and a half of it. So I think on that one, it's very clear what our verdicts are for this. But I want to ask both of you, what is if you had to if you had to take this movie and say, okay, I wanted this to be this starting off point, what part of it would you have like focused on? What element of this film do you think actually should have been the thing that we should have been focusing on instead of, sexy doctor or sexual doctor? I'm still not quite clear on where he was supposed to be in that.
I mean, I think the main ideas are good. It's like this merging of new technology, which was, a huge anxiety at the time between the Cold War and just like what we now know as the internet getting started. And so you see that paranoia reflected in films like Terminator, which came out only a few years after this, but um so like I think the basic story is usable, and the idea that it's this essentially an ancient witch using new technology and using capitalism as the method of delivery and the propagation of it. There's so many good like thematic threads you can pull here, and so I think just like I said, moving the timeline of the film up, not having the first death be 10 minutes into the movie, having that go quicker, them getting to the town quicker, and just spending more time there. I also think one of my big problems with this movie, honestly, was the fact that there like everybody else in the cult was a robot, or at least
Yeah.
like I thought the rule was like if you hear them speak, they're not a robot. I think there needed to be more human members of the cult because like the whole thing with the Wicker Man or Body Snatchers again is that the the deeper you go, the more you realize everybody's in on it.
Yeah.
And so like you could have had the robots, but I think more human faces were needed to so like what if for example with the parents watching the like what if that family watching that TV commercial, what if one of the parents knew what was going to happen and was part of it, and so like the wife is still screaming hysterically while the husband is watching on in grim satisfaction that the sacrifice works, and he so believed in the idea of the cult that he was willing to sacrifice his own son to see
Interesting.
just something like that.
I honestly, I completely, because the feeling of isolation for me is definitely one of those things. I have one qualifying question because I either missed it in watching the movie or the movie does a bad job explaining it. Was that ancient witch dude, was he actually just like an ancient dude, or was he just like a dude that was a witch?
I think it was in a long line. I will say the monologue that he has where he's explaining the nature of Halloween and he goes, "Oh, you thought it was just putting on a mask and then buying stuff and handing out candy."
Yeah.
I thought that was a really creepy, sinister moment in the film. So it's like again one of those little bright spots. I don't know, because it seems like he like even when he's getting zapped by Stonehenge at the end of the movie, he kind of has like a I won face.
Yeah.
So
Alex, all right. So I've picked Matt's brain on this one. How about you? How are you feeling after watching this piece?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, it's bad. Yeah, there's so many. But again, it had, like, some good intentions. I also feel like it's a little strange that the kids turn into, like, snakes and crickets. Not really sure the point of that. I thought they were in a room and they were going to be stuck in the room and the kid was going to do a sort of like Children of the Corn pet cemetery sort of deal and kill his parents. But instead his mom just passed out and then his dad was bitten by a rattlesnake ? Which I'd love to know how they did that.
Through his pants.
Like through his pants. I was like, I'm like, is that someone's actual leg? But
they
yeah, I think it could have been much better as a short. Obviously, it does kind of remind me of like Twilight Zone or Tales from the Crypt. And it could have been something where they built on it a lot. I love a really bleak ending where he wasn't able to change it. also the idea that, only 3 channels are available and they just can't get it off that 3rd channel. But overall, it's not a good movie. That's it.
Yeah, I can't help but echo a lot of the same sentiment. I feel like for me, so much of this would have been, again, like you can say better writing all you want, but like ultimately one of the big things for me that was just constantly taking me out was the idea that our main character is a doctor, and then like also like even going to the end when he's calling and trying to get the channels changed. Who is he calling that has that authority that's even going to believe this crazy
Yeah, I'm surprised
man?
he even got 2.
Yeah, it's like you want me to breach contract with what is advertising money? Hell no, I'm not doing that. I will lose my job. You are insane.
Well,
Not to mention that he doesn't just rip the mask off of the 3
kids.
kids in front of him. He's like, no!
Yeah.
Like, dude, at least take the masks off of these 3 kids.
Yeah, and I feel like for me, one of the big things is just like I wanted.
What if he was? Sorry,
Matt. I feel like you had such a great way of like being like this could have been so much better. It's just like the feeling of isolation. I felt like was the main type of horror that was trying to be invoked, but we never really got that, at least in full. And
because it also seems like this town isn't that far away from where he lives.
Yeah.
Because he runs on foot to the same gas station in the first one, and the closest hospital was his.
Exactly.
So, what if at the end, instead of calling the TV station, he's calling his wife?
Just to try and get his kids to look
to
away.
Save his kids.
Oh, man, that would have been brutal. Oh, you know what? No, I could have gone short film style, like we only get a little bit of introduction to his kids, if that's what that was.
Yeah, and we just hear his wife
man.
screaming on the other end. That would be great.
Oh, and the worst part is that the ending is probably the part of this movie that needs the least fixing. For me, like is it too much for me to ask for just a little bit less sexism in this film
in
from
the
the main
80s?
character?
No.
Is that too much, really? Though.
Yes.
In the 80s, yes.
Okay, well, join us next time for Halloween. I believe we're doing it
2007 and 2018.
Yeah, exactly. Where we're going to be joining back with Michael Myers and hopefully less sexism, right, Matt? Please say yes.
Actually, at least in the 2018.
At least in the 2018 one. Okay, so at least half of that podcast will be less bad. But anyway, you guys, if you made it this far, thank you so much. Let us know what you thought of Halloween in the comic, Halloween 3 in the comics, and let us know, are you part of that cult following for this film? Are you one of those people that really wants to see this thing expanded upon, or potentially, I don't know, maybe even remade? Because I feel like this is a film that could be remade and actually do well. Because, again, a lot of good shit here. Again, let us know if you got any dream castings for that or anything. It's all good. And again, if you're on audio, please come by our YouTube. That is youtube.com/Scope Productions. I'm not dabbing. It hurts my soul not to dab. And you can, and if you're on audio and you're looking for us, also just look up The Return of the Movie. You can find us on all of your podcasting applications. But YouTube's where we are. We make all of our content here. You can find a lot of Halloween-themed content going on this month. And I think that's about it. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye. This episode of The Return of the Movie was produced by Matt Kime, edited by Alexandra Vomley, with music by Benjamin Collins. The Return of the Movie is produced by ABBC Productions and released as part of our Scope network. You can find more of our podcasts and other content at youtube.com/Scope Productions.